We've covered a lot on this channel of businesses that are struggling because of Brexit. Now, we've normally covered them in the context of it has been a company that has been based in the UK. So they've been somewhere in the UK. They've been, up north. We've covered a company in Doncaster. We've covered all sorts of businesses here in the UK. But we've got to remember, we've got a lot of businesses that do have operating arms outside of the UK. And where are those arms most likely to be? Well, they're going to be in the EU. And especially today, we are going to take a close look at what has been going on to retailers, because there was this very interesting piece in the Irish Examiner about what has been happening to British retailers in Ireland. And to be honest, you're not going to be surprised what the cause is. It's Brexit. Because if a British retailer wanted to expand, then its almost best route, its best direction was to open up in Ireland, open up a store in, in Dublin or in Cork, two of Ireland's, largest cities. Those were the easiest ways of expansion. Say you've got, shared language, there's shared sort of similar buying practices and habits. It's an easy transition. And then eventually you could move on into Europe, which would be, again, slightly harder, but not impossible. But Ireland was always the best way and direction. And now you have British retailers, big established British retailers, that are closing their doors and struggling to stay afloat. And this is a very, very bad sign for the UK economy. A very bad sign. So before we get more into this, please do remember to click on the like, share, and subscribe button. And of course, down below, there are links to my Patreon page and a notification link called Buy Me Coffee, where you can buy me coffee. And of course, as always, there is the YouTube thank you button. And of course, there is the Pony Club down below as well. So let's crack on into this then. This comes from the Irish Examiner with the title of Why the Shutters Are Coming Down on Some of Britain's Retailers in Ireland. It is set to be a couple of difficult days for staff at British retailers Argos and Iceland, as one of its closes its doors in the Republic of Ireland for the last time, and the other faces ongoing uncertainty of whether the business can continue to operate. So these are the retailers. Now, it might be different for manufacturers, maybe it's different for like goods supply, etc. But retailers, this seems to be the biggest one that's hitting them very hard in Ireland. So these two are just the latest, and I didn't realize that this has been apparently something that had been ongoing for some time. And some of the most high-profile examples. Some of the issues that British retailers have been facing in the last few years, they are not alone. The abrupt exit of Debenhams from the Irish market during the start of the pandemic left staff reeling, fighting with the company for years over their redundancy. I never knew that about Debenhams either, but it makes sense if you're seeing all these British retailers just leave the island market. That's a very bad sign for certainly a lot of British companies. I mean, Debenhams was already very much in trouble prior before the pandemic, so it wasn't too surprising, to be honest. But the fact that you've now got Iceland, you've got Argos, and there's probably more that are left as well, it wouldn't surprise me if again, because I know I have viewers in Ireland, if you know a British store, maybe you know someone that is just a random British store, maybe it's not as big as something like Argos, but I wouldn't be surprised if you knew of stores that had closed because maybe they had a British origin, maybe they were actually based somewhere in the UK. It wouldn't surprise me to hear that from people in Ireland. So a UK retailer expanding into Ireland always made sense due to the country's close proximity to each other, the shared language, similar culture, spending habits, and Ireland's business-friendly environment, all of which made for very relative easy transitions. However, In recent years, it hasn't been all plain sailing. The strong competition from domestic firms, as well as the additional headaches that Brexit has caused, has left the UK retailers with a choice whether to invest more into the market or not. Melissa Moore, the retail industry expert and the host of the Retail Tea Break podcast, said that the elephant in the room is Brexit, which hasn't helped UK retailers operating in Ireland with all the different legislations and paperwork that has come with it. And it's always the case. It's the legislation, it's the paperwork. And people don't realize how much this paperwork costs, how that all adds up, because most of this paperwork is about what, £120, I think, something like that. Might not sound a lot, but if you are doing if you're doing constantly sending products over, then that very, very quickly adds up, and it was a cost that UK businesses did not have to pay before. And not only just a cost, but it adds time as well that businesses now need to spend additional resources on, because now they need to make sure that they've got experts in that, which again means that they've now got to pay someone to do that, whether externally or internally. So again, it adds to the cost. Again, it's a cost British consumers, well, not also not consumers, but British retailers did not have to pay. So back to it. So they were finding that before that, for an awful lot of British brands around the country, it was easy, she said. They literally just had to ship stock over and they would employ people here. It was very straightforward. It has become so much more difficult for them, she said, adding that there are more barriers now to trading, along with the cost of doing business going up as a result. A retail industry source who was experienced working with UK firms here in Ireland said that Brexit had forced British companies to consider whether they should invest more into Ireland or not, because the operations here can no longer function as simply as extensions of their UK operations. A source had said that prior to Brexit, there were some differences between the jurisdictions, and UK businesses could easily run the Irish side of their business as an almost regional operation. Now it becomes more of a choice, they said. Either they invest in the Irish market or maybe they don't. A lot of companies have decided, yes, the Irish market is good, the demographics are really good, the population is increasing, it's a wealthy economy. Argos is one of those companies that had to make a decision whether to invest more into the Irish market or pull out altogether. And when store closures were announced in January, the company said that the money it would have cost to develop to try and modernize its Irish arm of the businesses would be better spent elsewhere. At the time of that announcement, the company had 34 stores in the Republic of Ireland and employed over 580 staff. The remaining stores are all due to close on Saturday at 5 p.m. The company has been operating in Ireland since 1996, and Argos was acquired by the UK supermarket chain Sainsbury's in 2016, who then decided to shutter many of its standalone stores and replace them with outlets inside their stores. And a lack of Sainsbury's presence in the Republic of Ireland was probably one of the deciding factors when it came to this decision, along with the cost of doing business here. But Iceland has also different issues, but nevertheless is hampered by Brexit. Not surprising. Not surprising at all. Last week, the Food Safety Authorization in Ireland, what a surprise, issued an order for Iceland. It was operating the Republic of Ireland by Metron Stores Limited to withdraw and recall all imported frozen foods of animal origin from its stores brought into Ireland from March the 3rd. So the order came in as a result of food not having an EU veterinary certificate, only a UK one. Bear in mind how we said important these veterinary certificates are. And I wouldn't surprise me if you might see this have happened to other stores that maybe used to stock British produce. Wouldn't surprise me if that's happened as well to them. So the order came with the result of not having EU veterinary certificates, only a UK one, which would have not have been an issue if the UK was still in the EU. But according to the FSA, the food coming from Britain into the Republic of Ireland must go through documentary identity, physical checks in order to make sure that they comply with EU food law. And as we said before, it doesn't matter that we've left the EU, our companies here will still have to comply with EU law. And if the government says we are going to diverge, we are going to do something different, and they change the rules, well, guess what? It makes it even harder for these companies to even continue to trade because they've now got to jump through even more hoops to prove that they are following these regulations. And in some cases, some of the stuff maybe said, well, if your country isn't following that rule, you can't import that product. That's why we always said doesn't matter how many other trade deals that we sign because our biggest trading partner is the EU. That's never ever was going to change. Doesn't matter if we get this amazing sweetheart deal with America that was going to make looking staying in the single market look completely foolish again, according to Daniel Hanan. Because here we are, they're still our biggest trading partner. That doesn't go away. And that's why we've always said Labour doing those alignment deals is going to make people seriously reconsider rejoining the single market and customs union. Apply with the food. So the additional checks need to be performed on food that could obviously pose a risk to public health. Just to import food from the Republic, from Britain, now requires someone to have an economic operator registration and identification number. The other product classification codes are the various requirements for each food type and register with even the European Commission's Traces NT system to ensure that these foods are even easily accessible so that checks can be performed without much hassle. Remember, we all used to be within this system. We were all within those systems. Now we are a third country. So we're now outside those systems, meaning that we have to fill in paperwork, constant, massive mounds of paperwork, which cost companies money. So while the Iceland stores in Ireland have been in difficulty for months, the accumulating in staff shrinking and the overall payroll issues, including the working conditions in May, this order from the FFFSAI seemed to snowball quickly. And by Tuesday, the High Court appointed an interim examiner to oversee the company. The company claimed that it was insolvent, unable to pay the estimated £36 million in debt it owed. The company operates at least 26 stores across the country and employs more than 344 people. On Wednesday, the staff in the Cloak location staged a sit-in protest during the week after they arrived in store to find it shuttered, leaving them potentially out of the job. Not all Iceland stores, of course, are closing. While not all UK-based companies with Irish operations are facing the same difficulties, there have been some very high-profile examples. In recent weeks, it was revealed that the British lingerie retailer Ann Summers has discontinued its direct sailing business in Ireland due to the high operating costs associated with Brexit, which made it unfeasible. That decision was made in September last year. I mean, this is it. When you get companies like this that are going, it's just unfeasible. There's no point. It's costing us more than we would make to even send product. And if they're cancelling the Irish arm, the Republic, the Republic arm, what about the rest of the EU arm? You know, we've warned about this constantly that this would happen and that British firms would pull away out of that market, and that is a massive loss for these companies. And one of the things we ended up saying, why did we join the European Economic Area, or at least the European Economic Agreement before it became the EU back in the 70s? It was because all these big companies were saying, we want inside the single market. We want inside that. Because it's not being inside that is damaging our business. It's damaging business opportunities. And who did they go to first? It was a conservative PM who eventually went, yeah, I agree. We need to be inside that. It will not be long before the businesses start to really scream and shout at the Conservatives, because guess who are some of the Conservatives' biggest donors? They're some of Britain's biggest business owners. And I guarantee you, these conversations are already taking place behind the scenes. Might not have been made public yet, but I can guarantee you these conversations are happening. But it continues. So, however, the company does continue to operate its stores in Dublin and Cork, despite the closure of its direct selling arm. The British retailer Marks and Spencer's has also experienced some difficulties as a result of Brexit. Profits at its Irish locations were down 7.8%, despite sales increasing by 15.1%, largely being driven by the clothing and homeware. In its recent published annual results, M&S cited a 3.5% decline in food sales due to the new import rules and the additional paperwork as a result of Brexit. The company has said that it's had to cut over 800 product lines in stores in the Republic of Ireland. So eventually, you could probably see a situation where M&S, pardon me, where M&S in Ireland just doesn't sell food anymore. It just does clothing and homeware. You can see that probably happening right now. So, despite these issues facing the company, Miss Moore has cited M&S as a good example of the British companies doing what needs to be done to keep the foothold in the Irish market, pointing to their revamped stores in Lilith Valley in Dublin. Their food offering looks superb. They've been very savvy about doing what is need to be doing to be still having the correct offering for the Irish public, she said. One of the earliest casualties in the pandemic was Debenhams, which closed its Irish operations in April 2020, never to reopen, prompting its former workers to protest over redundancy payments. It employed over 2,000 people here during the time of closing. However, Debenhams' difficulties were not confined to the Irish market, and its UK operations also went into administration. In June of last year, Mothercare Ireland announced that it was entering its Irish franchises into liquidation, resulting in its closure of over 14 stores and a loss of 197 jobs. The company said that the business in Ireland was no longer sustainable following the impact of the pandemic, coupled with the issues they will have in their supply chain. The businesses were expected to sustain significant losses for years to come before it closed. And this is it. You've got, I think, M&S, who I just said you can probably see a situation where M&S probably no longer sells food. Well, you can guess where all that food is probably coming from M&S in those stores now. They're probably trying to either source it directly from Irish suppliers or EU suppliers, because obviously if it's a store in the EU, it still has access to that EU market, so it can get those products. But if you're a UK store, well, you've got to go through all those hoops. You've got to, if M&S wants to send stuff over to its Republic of Ireland stores, well, now it's got to jump through all those hoops. Does it do that anymore? Does it even bother? And like I say, we've seen many businesses we've covered over the time of doing this just said, "What's the point?" No, if they're in the EU, well, I've got the rest of the EU to sell into, so it doesn't really matter that I've lost the UK. Whereas if you are a UK business, you've lost the entire access to the EU market. You've lost all those other 27 countries you could have sold into, and basically treated as if you were selling it from, you were based up in York and you were selling it to, somewhere down in London. You've lost that ability. And we always said just how important that ability was, because lots of UK businesses used the single market as a way to expand their business, to expand their business reach, to sell into those markets without really having to have a physical presence there. Now, some did have shops and stores and etc., but obviously that costs money. But if you're a small, medium-sized business, well, you just have a website and now you just open it to EU sales. And that is the big thing that we have seen. You've seen lots of small companies that used to sell into the EU not do that anymore. And I'll give you a prime example. I recently bought some miniatures from a company called Grebo Games. They're based in Italy. Now, prior to Brexit, it cost me nothing. But if I want to buy any model, even if I just want to buy one model from Grebo, which cost me about one model is about let's say €4, something like that. If I were to buy just like €1, like one model, it cost me on top of that €20. So on top of the cost, I am paying an extra €20. Now imagine I'm a British consumer. I'm going to be now incredibly put off buying products from the EU because of something like that. And vice versa. If you're an EU customer and you want to buy something from the UK, you're going to be put off by the fact that, well, now you've got to pay extra to get it delivered to you, to be able to, get it across the border to you. And there's still a lot of stories of people, rather than receiving their product, receiving a letter saying, oh, by the way, you've got this customs charge you now need to pay. So it's very, very bad situation for a lot of companies still, both in Ireland and in the UK when it comes to regarding this. So back to it. So the retail industry source has also added that the UK retail sector is going through a lot of changes, such as ownership changes, new market entrants, and companies getting into difficulties and needing to be rescued, all of which are going to have an impact on its Irish operations anyway. The sector is in a constant state of transition away anyway because of the digitization and because of the changing consumer habits, they said. What ends up meaning is that companies have a presence in Ireland are going to be affected by that. What happened in the Irish market might not necessarily be particularly relevant at all, but it might be something that big corporate decisions being made in the UK. Ms. Moore said that that there was an exciting time for Irish retailers as things haven't really changed, and now they are treating the UK market as part of a global strategy. They are now seeing the UK market as part of a global strategy, whether it is in the UK or in the Middle East, she said. I think there's a really exciting time for Irish brands pushing outside the immediate neighbours, which will be only good for the Irish retailers and Irish brands. Irish retail will find out of this, but as for British retail, it has become far more difficult for them. It is not just, of course, trading in Ireland, it's trading across Europe. While some UK retailers have had a few difficult retail years in Ireland, some are doing very well. Tesco routinely has the second highest market share of the supermarket spending in Ireland, just behind the Dunnes store. The Fraser Group has also announced an expansion of its flannel store into the Irish market, with at least 3 shops opening this year. In addition, last month, British music retailer HMV announced its return of its Irish market 7 years after shutting its last remaining stores here. So, while it's not, of course, complete doom and gloom, let's paint a very clear reality what's going on here. If you want to invest in the Irish market, you are now having to spend, let's say, you want to open, I don't know, 2 or 3 stores. You've now got to spend at least a significant amount of money more than you probably had to. You've got to think of supply chains. You've got to think of products. Are you going to be supplying the products from the UK, or are they going to be coming from elsewhere, from Europe? Because then that changes whole sections of things. And meanwhile, because again, you are a British company, you are a British brand, you're going to have an even increasingly hard time trying to convince customers in the EU to buy British. Now, I don't think we've fully seen the effects of this yet, but I think these are sooner or later going to start to set in, where we start to see EU customers turned off of British brands because of the extra cost that they have felt over the past couple of years because of the Brexit transition period. And that is going to be incredibly damaging to the brands, because even if, let's say, you're a clothing retailer and you want to start an expansion into the EU, you want to open some shops. It's expansion into another country. This is what we see all the time in sort of retail, especially in clothing. You want to sort of expand into sort of new markets. And when you open, you are seen as a British brand, as a British company, and maybe you're seen as not the most attractive store to go into because, well, you're a British brand. And that can happen with consumer brands. So the full effects of this, and especially in retail, while some stores maybe do all right, you've seen they said obviously M&S doing all right. I could potentially see an outcome maybe where M&S goes, do we really want to continue selling food, or do we really want to be selling British made food to into Ireland because it costs so much more? That's a possible outcome. You've had a lot of, again, as you said, British stores really struggling. And I think that's going to be coming to a lot of people's minds. Do we want to sort of, expand into Ireland now because of Brexit? And then, of course, this stops potential growth into there of the store. Again, it ends up being bad on the British economy. And meanwhile, as they said there, the Irish retailers are loving it because now you've had some of your biggest competitors struggling in your home market. And that is only good news for you. That is only good news for you. Not only that, but here's the thing, you can expand more, not only into Europe, but as you said, beyond Europe. They said they're going to try to expand into the Middle East with some of the Irish brands. You can only really do that if you have, first of all, good, strong roots in your sort of home country, and then you've expanded into your neighborhoods and you've managed to once again build that strong roots and those foundations of your brand, and of course you spread out. So at the end of the day, while it might not be all doom and gloom for some British retailers, it has become infinitely harder, which is the exact same story we are hearing about this every single time we cover businesses like this. Every single time, it has become harder for us. And as I said just a few moments ago, why did we end up joining the European Economic Area in the first place? It was because British businesses said, we want in there because we are losing out. We are being seen as uncompetitive. We are losing out on huge amounts of potential profit. We want back in there. And like I say, some of the Conservatives' biggest donors are British businessmen and British, retail businessmen. Chairman of Tesco's, prime example. We'll see eventually if these calls become so loud and deafening that the Conservative Party changes its mind on that. But to be honest, at the moment, the Conservatives have a lot bigger issues in the fact that, well, they're probably going to go plunging into a civil war potentially after the next general election. I guess they're going to have to find out which way do they want to go. And even then, it may be very much a way that is completely unappealing to the British public. And then again, they will just go through all this cycle and it will just be continuing cycle. And like I said, this will be good for us, for progressives in the UK, because now we can get really stuff done because the Conservative Party is just absolutely weak. So a lot of opportunity for us. But we'll see. We'll see. But as always, thank you very much for watching. And of course, as always, please remember to click that like, share, and subscribe button. And of course, we'll see you all next time.